The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Horse Guards Parade in London, where Sergeant Major Thompson adjusted his polished brass buttons one final time. Behind him stood Midnight, a magnificent Blackshear horse whose gentle eyes seemed to hold wisdom beyond his years. Thompson had been paired with Midnight for 3 years now, and their bond was unbreakable. The horse stood 17 hands high, his coat gleaming like obsidian in the early light, but it was his temperament that made him truly special. As tourists began to gather for the daily changing of the guard ceremony, Thompson noticed something different about today's crowd. Among the usual mix of international visitors and excited families stood a small group from Sunshine Manor, a local care facility for children and adults with special needs. Their brightly colored t-shirts made them easy to spot, and their carers wore patient smiles as they helped organize the group for the best viewing spots. 8-year-old Emma clutched her mother's hand tightly, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. Born with Down syndrome, Emma had always been fascinated by horses, spending hours watching videos of them on her tablet at home. Her mother, Sarah, had promised this visit for months, carefully preparing Emma for what they might see and experience. The little girl's face lit up as she spotted Midnight, and she tugged on her mother's sleeve with urgent excitement. Thompson had been briefed about the special visitors that morning. His commanding officer had explained that the group would be staying after the ceremony for a special meet-and-greet session, something the Guard had started doing quarterly to give back to the community. What Thompson didn't know was how profoundly this day would change his perspective on his role as a guardian of tradition. Midnight seemed to sense something different too. The horse's ears pricked forward as he watched the approaching group, his usual stoic demeanor softening slightly. Years of training had taught both horse and rider to remain perfectly still during their duties, but there was an alertness in Midnight's posture that suggested he was more aware than usual of the people gathering nearby. The ceremony began with its usual pomp and pageantry. The sound of hooves on cobblestones echoed through the courtyard as the guards took their positions. Tourists snapped photos and whispered in excited voices, but Thompson found his attention drawn repeatedly to the group from Sunshine Manor. A young man in his 20s, clearly on the autism spectrum, was methodically counting each horse as they passed, his lips moving silently as he tracked the numbers with intense concentration. Emma had positioned herself at the very front of the barrier, her small hands gripping the metal rail as she watched every movement with rapt attention. When Midnight came into view during the ceremonial inspection, she let out a small gasp of delight that somehow carried over the noise of the crowd. The sound reached Thompson's ears, and he felt something stir in his chest that had nothing to do with military protocol. As the formal ceremony concluded and the crowds began to disperse, the special group remained behind as planned. Thompson dismounted and began the process of introducing Midnight to their guests, but he quickly realized this would be unlike any interaction he had ever facilitated. The usual rules about maintaining distance in formal behavior seemed inadequate for what was about to unfold. Dr. Patricia Wells, the facility's director, approached Thompson with a warm smile and a notebook full of carefully prepared information about each visitor's specific needs and triggers. She explained that some might be overwhelmed by noise, others might want to touch everything, and some might not speak at all but would communicate in their own unique ways. Thompson listened carefully, understanding that his role was about to expand far beyond that of a ceremonial guard. The first breakthrough came when Marcus, a 16-year-old with cerebral palsy who used a wheelchair, rolled up to within a few feet of Midnight. The horse, as if sensing the young man's physical limitations, lowered his great head slowly and gently, bringing himself down to Marcus's eye level. The teenager's face broke into a radiant smile, and he reached out tentatively with a trembling hand that had been affected by his condition. What happened next would stay with Thompson for the rest of his career. Midnight, trained to stand perfectly still regardless of external stimuli, began to shift his weight almost imperceptibly, moving closer to Marcus's wheelchair. The horse's instinct seemed to override his training as he recognized something in the young man that called for gentleness rather than military precision. The connection between them was immediate and profound, transcending the barriers of species and ability. Sarah watched with tears in her eyes as Emma finally gathered the courage to approach the massive horse. Her daughter had always been cautious around new experiences, but something about Midnight's calm presence seemed to dissolve her usual anxiety. The horse stood like a statue, but his eyes followed the little girl's every movement with an intelligence that spoke of understanding, rather than mere obedience. Thompson found himself studying the faces of the visitors, seeing wonder and joy in expressions that had probably faced countless challenges and disappointments. James, a 10-year-old with severe autism who rarely made eye contact with humans, looked directly into Midnight's eyes and began speaking in a soft, steady stream of facts about horses that amazed even the adults present. His knowledge was encyclopedic, covering everything from breeding patterns to historical battle tactics involving cavalry units. The transformation in the atmosphere was palpable. What had begun as a routine community outreach event was becoming something much more significant. The rigid structure of military protocol was giving way to something more human, more connected. Thompson realized that both he and Midnight were learning as much from their visitors as they were giving, and the day was far from over. The magic of the morning encounter had created something unexpected among the group from Sunshine Manor. Where there had been initial nervousness and uncertainty, now there was eager anticipation and growing confidence. Emma had not only approached Midnight but had also managed to place her small palm against his neck, feeling the warmth of his coat and the steady rhythm of his breathing. Her mother Sarah watched in amazement as her typically anxious daughter stood completely relaxed beside the enormous horse. Dr. Wells had seen many therapeutic interactions in her years of working with special needs individuals, but what she was witnessing here was different. The horses seemed to possess an intuitive understanding that went beyond their training. When Rebecca, a young woman with intellectual disabilities who often became overwhelmed in social situations, began to show signs of distress from the crowd noise, Midnight actually took a step forward, creating a natural barrier between her and the busy courtyard behind them. Thompson was beginning to understand that his role was evolving in real time. Military protocol had prepared him for many scenarios, but nothing in his training manual covered what to do when a horse seemed to be making therapeutic decisions independently. He watched as Midnight's stablemate Wellington, a chestnut gelding known for his spirited temperament during ceremonies, approached the group with an unusual calm that surprised even his own handler. Marcus had not stopped smiling since his first interaction with Midnight. From his wheelchair, he had begun a running commentary about everything he was observing, his speech sometimes difficult to understand due to his condition, but his enthusiasm absolutely clear. His occupational therapist, who had accompanied the group, was taking notes furiously, recognizing that Marcus was demonstrating motor skills and verbal communication far beyond what they typically saw in clinical settings. The breakthrough moment came when James, the boy with autism who had been reciting horse facts, suddenly went quiet. Thompson had been warned that sudden silence might indicate that James was becoming overwhelmed. But instead of retreating, the boy moved closer to Wellington. In a voice barely above a whisper, James began to hum a melody that none of the adults recognized. What happened next defied all logical explanation. Wellington began to bob his head gently, almost as if he was keeping time with James's humming. The horse's ears were forward, completely focused on the boy, and his large brown eyes never left James's face. The humming continued for several minutes, creating a bubble of tranquility around the pair that seemed to affect everyone present. Even the other visitors had stopped their own conversations to watch this extraordinary exchange between boy and horse. Dr. Wells later explained to Thompson that James rarely vocalized at all, and when he did, it was usually to share factual information rather than to express emotion through music. The humming represented a form of communication that James had never demonstrated before, and the horse's response suggested a level of interspecies understanding that challenged conventional thinking about animal intelligence and empathy. Emma had grown bold enough to offer Midnight a carrot that one of the handlers had provided. Her fine motor skills, affected by Down syndrome, made the simple act of holding the carrot steady a challenge, but Midnight seemed to understand. The horse moved his great head with infinite patience, allowing Emma multiple attempts to position the treat correctly. When he finally took the carrot from her hand, his lips barely grazed her palm, gentle as a whisper. The interaction was having an equally profound effect on the horses. Thompson had worked with Midnight for years and had never seen him display this level of individual attention and responsiveness outside of their training exercises. It was as if the horse had tapped into some deeper instinct that recognized vulnerability and responded with protection and comfort. The military bearing was still there, but it was now accompanied by something that looked remarkably like compassion. Rebecca, who had initially seemed overwhelmed, had found her comfort zone standing very close to Wellington's shoulder. She wasn't touching the horse, but her proximity to him seemed to provide a sense of security that allowed her to engage with the group in ways that surprised her caregivers. She began asking questions about the horse's daily routines, showing an interest in structure and schedule that resonated with her own need for predictability. A small crowd of regular tourists had gathered at a respectful distance, drawn by the obviously special nature of what was taking place. Some were taking photos, but most were simply watching with expressions of wonder. Thompson realized that the lesson being taught here extended far beyond the immediate participants. The tourists were witnessing something that challenged assumptions about limitations and possibilities, about the nature of communication and connection. The horses themselves were teaching a masterclass in patience and intuition. They seemed to understand that their usual responses needed to be modified for these particular interactions. Movements that would normally be quick and efficient became slow and deliberate. Heads that would typically be held high in military alertness were lowered to accommodate shorter statures and different perspectives. Even their breathing seemed more conscious, as if they understood that every aspect of their presence was being carefully observed and interpreted. As the session progressed, Thompson found himself learning new skills in real time. He discovered that his usual commanding voice needed to be softer, his explanations more detailed, and his patience seemingly infinite. But rather than feeling burdened by these adjustments, he felt energized by the challenge and deeply moved by the trust being placed in him by the visitors and their caregivers. The morning was revealing depths of character in both horses and humans that might never have emerged under ordinary circumstances, and Thompson sensed that everyone present was being changed by the experience in ways that would resonate long after the formal visit had ended. The afternoon brought an unexpected development that would transform what was meant to be a single special visit into something much more significant. Word had spread through the facility about the remarkable morning at Horse Guards Parade, and Dr. Wells received a phone call from the parents of other residents asking if similar visits might be possible. Meanwhile, Thompson found himself unable to stop thinking about the interactions he had witnessed, particularly the way Midnight and Wellington had seemed to intuitively understand each visitor's specific needs. Back at Sunshine Manor, the participants in the morning visit were experiencing their own revelations. Emma had not stopped talking about Midnight since returning home, demonstrating a level of sustained focus and communication that delighted her speech therapist. She had begun drawing pictures of the horse, and while her fine motor skills made detailed artwork challenging, the emotion and memory captured in her colorful sketches were unmistakable. Marcus had wheeled himself to the facility's computer room and was researching everything he could find about the household cavalry. His physical therapist noticed that his determination to navigate websites and read about the horses was motivating him to work harder on his hand coordination and reading comprehension than she had seen in months of regular therapy sessions. The visit had sparked an intellectual curiosity that was driving him to push past his usual physical limitations. James had returned to his characteristic quiet, but his caregivers noticed something different. He was humming frequently, the same melody he had shared with Wellington, and he seemed more relaxed overall. His mother reported that bedtime, usually a source of anxiety and rigid routine requirements, had become easier since the visit. James was falling asleep while humming his horse song, and his sleep was more peaceful than it had been in years. Thompson had requested a meeting with his commanding officer to discuss the morning's events. Colonel Harrison listened with growing interest as Thompson described the horse's behavior and the profound impact the visit seemed to have had on everyone involved. What struck the colonel most was Thompson's obvious personal investment in the experience and his detailed observations about animal behavior that went far beyond his usual duties. Their conversation led to a proposal that surprised even Thompson. Colonel Harrison suggested that they develop a formal program of therapeutic visits, working with local care facilities to provide regular opportunities for special needs individuals to interact with the horses. The military precision that defined the household cavalry could be channeled into creating structured, safe, and meaningful therapeutic experiences. Dr. Wells was thrilled when Thompson called to propose the expanded program. Her professional experience had shown her that breakthroughs like those witnessed that morning were rare and precious, and the idea of being able to replicate and build upon them was exciting from both therapeutic and research perspectives. She immediately began documenting the changes she had observed in the participants and reaching out to other professionals in the field who might want to study the program. The horses themselves seemed to sense that something had changed in their routine. Midnight and Wellington displayed a new alertness during regular duties, as if they were processing their recent experiences and integrating them into their understanding of their role. Their handlers reported that both horses seemed more attentive to individual people in crowds, occasionally breaking their usual pattern of looking straight ahead to make brief eye contact with visitors who showed particular interest. Rebecca's family noticed the most dramatic change. She had always struggled with social anxiety and often became overwhelmed in group settings. But since the visit to horse guards, she had begun asking to participate in more facility activities. Her confidence seemed to have received a significant boost from her successful interaction with Wellington, and she was applying that confidence to other areas of her life. Thompson began researching equine therapy and was amazed to discover the extensive scientific literature supporting the therapeutic benefits of human-animal interactions. He learned about programs around the world where horses were being used to help individuals with autism, cerebral palsy, PTSD, and various intellectual disabilities. The more he read, the more he realized that what they had stumbled upon that morning was part of a much larger understanding about the healing power of interspecies connections. The second official visit was scheduled for 2 weeks later, and this time Thompson was prepared. He had consulted with equine therapy experts and had developed a more structured approach that would maximize the therapeutic benefits while ensuring safety for both visitors and horses. The military organization skills that made him an excellent sergeant major were proving invaluable in creating protocols for these special interactions. Midnight seemed to remember Emma immediately when she returned with her mother. The horse's recognition was so obvious that even casual observers commented on it. When Emma approached, Midnight lowered his head in the same gentle gesture he had used during their first meeting, and Emma responded with a confidence that amazed her mother. The little girl had been practicing at home, and she carefully offered Midnight a treat with steady hands that showed marked improvement in her fine motor control. Wellington's reunion with James was equally remarkable. The boy approached the horse with his characteristic careful observation, but this time he didn't wait as long before beginning to hum. Wellington's response was immediate, the same gentle head bobbing that had characterized their first interaction. Several members of Dr. Wells's staff were present to observe this time, and they documented the interaction with careful notes about body language, vocalization patterns, and duration of engagement. The success of the second visit convinced everyone involved that they were onto something special. The horses were not just tolerating these interactions, they were actively participating in them in ways that suggested genuine engagement and even enjoyment. The visitors were showing sustained improvements in various areas of their development, and the program was generating interest from therapeutic communities far beyond their local area. What had begun as a simple community outreach gesture was evolving into something that would challenge conventional thinking about therapy, about military service, and about the remarkable capacity for connection that exists between humans and animals when the right conditions are created for it to flourish. 6 months after that first transformative morning, the Healing Hooves program had become an integral part of both the Household Cavalry's community outreach efforts and Sunshine Manor's therapeutic programming. Thompson had been officially designated as the program coordinator, a role that utilized his military organizational skills while allowing him to pursue his growing passion for therapeutic work. The success stories were accumulating, and each visit brought new revelations about the capacity for healing that existed in the relationship between horses and humans. Emma had progressed remarkably in multiple areas of her development. Her speech therapist documented significant improvements in vocabulary, sentence structure, and social communication skills. More importantly, Emma's confidence had blossomed. She had begun telling other children about her friendship with Midnight, and her stories were inspiring other families to seek out therapeutic opportunities for their own children. Sarah, Emma's mother, had become an advocate for the program, sharing their story with parent support groups and helping to expand awareness of the therapeutic benefits they had witnessed. The program had also attracted the attention of medical researchers. Dr. Samantha Chen, a neurologist specializing in developmental disabilities, had approached Thompson and Dr. Wells about conducting formal studies on the therapeutic outcomes they were observing. Her preliminary research suggested that the interactions with horses were stimulating neural pathways associated with emotional regulation, social communication, and motor skill development in ways that traditional therapies sometimes struggled to achieve. Marcus had become the program's most enthusiastic historian. His research skills had led him to compile an extensive database of information about each horse in the household cavalry, and he had begun creating detailed profiles that helped match visitors with horses based on personality compatibility. His physical therapy had progressed significantly as his motivation to participate in horse-related activities pushed him to work harder on improving his mobility and hand-eye coordination. James's transformation had been perhaps the most profound. The boy who rarely spoke to humans had developed an extensive vocabulary for communicating with Wellington. His humming had evolved into soft singing, and he had begun creating original songs about his experiences with the horses. His parents reported that his anxiety levels had decreased significantly, and he was showing more flexibility in his daily routines, changes that were making life easier for the entire family. Thompson had discovered a calling he never knew existed. His background in military leadership translated surprisingly well to therapeutic program management, and he found deep satisfaction in seeing the positive impacts of the work. He had begun studying equine therapy formally, taking evening classes and attending workshops to better understand the science behind what they were witnessing. His commanding officers were so impressed with the program's success that they had given him additional time and resources to expand its reach. The horses themselves had become celebrities of sorts. Midnight and Wellington were specifically requested by many returning visitors, and both horses seemed to take pride in their therapeutic roles. Their behavior during regular ceremonial duties had also changed subtly. They appeared more aware of individual people in crowds, and handlers reported that they seemed particularly responsive to children and individuals who might be watching from wheelchairs or with obvious disabilities. Rebecca's progress exemplified the program's broader impact. She had not only overcome her initial social anxiety, but had become a mentor to newer participants in the program. Her natural empathy and her own experience with the challenges of disability made her uniquely qualified to help others feel comfortable during their first visits. Dr. Wells had begun training Rebecca as a peer counselor, and her work with incoming visitors was proving invaluable. The program had expanded beyond Sunshine Manor to include partnerships with several other care facilities and therapeutic organizations in the London area. Each new group brought different challenges and opportunities, and Thompson was constantly learning about various conditions and how they might be addressed through equine interaction. Veterans with PTSD, elderly patients with dementia, and children with various forms of developmental delay were all finding benefits in the structured interactions with the horses. One particularly moving development involved a group of veterans who had been struggling with readjustment to civilian life. Many of them had military backgrounds, and the combination of the familiar structure of military protocol with the therapeutic benefits of animal interaction created a unique environment for healing. Thompson found himself serving as a bridge between worlds, helping veterans reconnect with the positive aspects of military service while addressing their therapeutic needs. The success of the program had begun attracting international attention. Delegations from other countries' mounted units had visited to observe the program and discuss implementing similar initiatives. Thompson had been invited to speak at conferences on therapeutic riding and animal-assisted therapy, sharing insights about the specific benefits of working with trained military horses versus typical therapy animals. Dr. Chen's research was yielding fascinating results. Brain imaging studies of program participants showed measurable changes in areas associated with stress response, emotional regulation, and social cognition. The data was supporting what everyone involved had observed. Anecdotally, the interactions with the horses were creating genuine neurological changes that translated into improved functioning in daily life. The Program had also inspired changes within the household cavalry itself. Other guards had requested to be trained in therapeutic interaction techniques, and the success of the Healing Hooves program had led to discussions about expanding the military's role in community therapeutic services. The traditional mission of ceremonial duties was being enhanced by a new understanding of service that extended beyond pageantry, to include healing and support. As Thompson reflected, on the journey from that first spontaneous interaction to the established program they now operated, he realized that the initial magic had not been lost in the formalization process. If anything, the structure and intentionality they had developed had amplified the therapeutic benefits while ensuring safety and sustainability. The program had become a model that other organizations were studying and replicating, but at its heart, it remained what it had always been, a testament to the profound capacity for connection and healing that exists when humans and animals meet with open hearts and minds. 2 years into the program's existence, an unexpected crisis would test everything that Thompson and his team had built, while ultimately strengthening the bonds that had formed between horses, handlers, and participants. Wellington had developed a leg injury during routine training that required several weeks of rest and rehabilitation. For many of the regular participants, Wellington wasn't just a horse, he had become a trusted friend, whose absence created genuine anxiety and concern. James took the news particularly hard. His connection with Wellington had been the foundation of his remarkable progress, and the thought that his friend was hurt distressed him in ways that worried his parents and caregivers. For the first time since the program began, James reverted to some of his earlier anxious behaviors, and his carefully structured world felt disrupted by the absence of his weekly musical conversations with Wellington. Thompson realized this crisis presented both a challenge and an opportunity. Rather than simply reassigning participants to other horses, he decided to involve them in Wellington's recovery process. With veterinary guidance and careful safety protocols, selected participants were allowed to visit Wellington in the medical stall, bringing him treats, helping with gentle grooming activities, and simply providing companionship during his healing period. Emma, now 10 years old and dramatically more confident than the anxious little girl who had first approached Midnight, surprised everyone by taking initiative in organizing get-well cards for Wellington. Her improved communication skills and natural leadership abilities emerged as she coordinated efforts among participants to create artwork, write letters, and even compose songs for their injured friend. The project became a powerful exercise in empathy, community building, and practical application of the social skills many participants had developed through the program. The situation also revealed depths of animal intelligence and emotional capacity that impressed even the veterinary staff. Wellington seemed to understand that his visitors were concerned about him, and his demeanor with them was noticeably different from his interactions with regular caretakers. He was gentler, more patient, and seemed to draw comfort from their presence just as they were comforted by seeing that he was healing well. Marcus had thrown himself into researching equine injuries and rehabilitation, becoming an expert on Wellington's condition and treatment plan. His dedication to understanding every aspect of his friend's care was motivating him to achieve new levels of focus and academic performance. His occupational therapist noted that his fine motor skills were improving rapidly as he worked to create detailed charts tracking Wellington's progress and recovery milestones. During this period, other horses in the program stepped up in remarkable ways. Midnight seemed to sense that additional responsibilities had fallen to him, and he began interacting with participants who had primarily worked with Wellington. His natural empathy and patience were tested and proven as he helped bridge the gap during Wellington's absence. Other horses in the cavalry also began participating in the program, each bringing unique personalities and strengths to the therapeutic interactions. Dr. Chen used this period to conduct intensive studies on the grief and coping responses of individuals with developmental disabilities. Her research documented how program participants were processing their concern for Wellington and applying coping strategies they had learned through their therapeutic interactions. The data provided valuable insights into emotional resilience and the role that animal relationships play in developing healthy responses to stress and uncertainty. Rebecca had evolved into an unofficial assistant coordinator for the program, and during Wellington's recovery, Her organizational and empathetic skills truly shined. She created a rotation schedule for visits to Wellington, helped newer participants understand what was happening, and served as a calming presence for those who were struggling with the change in routine. Her own growth from an anxious young woman to a confident leader was one of the program's most remarkable success stories. The recovery period also attracted media attention that brought the program to national prominence. News outlets were fascinated by the story of special needs individuals caring for an injured military horse, and the coverage helped raise awareness about therapeutic riding programs across the country. Thompson found himself fielding calls from other military units interested in starting similar programs and from therapeutic organizations seeking guidance on incorporating military horses into their work. When Wellington finally returned to active participation in the program, the reunion was emotional for everyone involved. James approached his friend with tears in his eyes and immediately began humming their familiar song. Wellington's response was immediate and enthusiastic, and the connection between them seemed even stronger for having weathered the temporary separation. The experience had taught both horse and boy about resilience, patience, and the enduring nature of true friendship. The crisis had also strengthened relationships within the participant community. Many individuals had formed friendships with each other during the group efforts to support Wellington, and these connections extended beyond the program sessions. Parents reported that their children were maintaining friendships and support relationships that enriched their social lives and provided additional opportunities for growth and learning. Thompson reflected that Wellington's injury, while initially concerning, had ultimately taught everyone involved valuable lessons about community, resilience, and the depth of emotional connections that could form between species. The program had weathered its first major challenge and emerged stronger, with deeper relationships and a more comprehensive understanding of the therapeutic process. The experience had also led to innovations in program design. Thompson and Dr. Wells developed protocols for involving participants in the ongoing care and welfare of the horses, creating opportunities for responsibility, empathy development, and practical skill building. Participants could now contribute to daily care routines, assist with minor grooming tasks, and even help with basic health monitoring activities under careful supervision. As Wellington returned to full health and resumed his regular therapeutic work, the program entered a new phase of maturity and sophistication, built on the foundation of genuine caring relationships that had proven their strength during a time of challenge and uncertainty. 5 years had passed since that first magical morning, when Emma reached out her small hand to touch Midnight's neck, and the ripple effects of that moment continued to expand in ways that none of the original participants could have imagined. The Healing Hooves program had become a permanent fixture at Horse Guards Parade, officially recognized and funded as a therapeutic initiative that served as a model for similar programs worldwide. Emma, now 13 and in secondary school, had discovered her calling in life through her relationship with the horses. She volunteered regularly with the program, helping newer participants overcome their initial fears and anxieties. Her communication skills had developed so remarkably that she was considering studying veterinary medicine or therapeutic riding instruction. The shy little girl who once clutched her mother's hand in fear had become a confident young woman who was inspiring others through her own journey of growth and discovery. Thompson had been promoted to captain and had earned official certification as an equine-assisted therapy specialist. His military career had taken an unexpected but deeply fulfilling turn as he balanced traditional cavalry duties with his expanding role in therapeutic programming. The program had grown to serve over 200 individuals annually, and Thompson had trained a team of guards who shared his passion for the healing work they were doing. The research conducted by Dr. Chen and her colleagues had been published in several prestigious journals, contributing to the scientific understanding of animal-assisted therapy, and specifically highlighting the unique benefits of working with highly trained military horses. The data showed measurable improvements in communication skills, emotional regulation, motor function, and social interaction among participants, validating what everyone involved had observed through their direct experience. James, now 15, had become something of a legend in the therapeutic riding community. His musical relationship with Wellington had evolved into compositions that he performed at program fundraising events, and he had begun teaching other young people on the autism spectrum how to use music as a bridge for communicating with horses. His transformation from a largely nonverbal child to a confident performer and teacher illustrated the profound potential for growth that existed within every individual. Marcus had achieved his dream of becoming the program's official historian and data coordinator. His detailed documentation of each participant's progress and his comprehensive knowledge of every horse in the cavalry had made him an invaluable resource for both the therapeutic team and the military unit. His physical limitations had never prevented him from contributing meaningfully to the program, and his success had inspired other individuals with disabilities to pursue their own passions despite challenges. Rebecca had completed training as a certified peer counselor and was working part-time with the program while pursuing further education in social work. Her journey from an anxious young woman to a confident professional helper embodied the transformative power of the therapeutic relationships she had experienced with the horses. She specialized in helping families navigate their first visits to the program, using her own experiences to provide reassurance and practical guidance. The program had expanded to include multiple therapeutic modalities. Beyond the basic interaction sessions, participants could now engage in equine-assisted learning, therapeutic riding, and even competitive activities for those who developed advanced skills and interests. The horses had adapted to these various roles with remarkable flexibility, each developing specialties based on their individual temperaments and the needs of different participant populations. Midnight, now a senior horse at 18, had become the grandfather figure of the program. His gentle wisdom and infinite patience made him particularly effective with first-time visitors and individuals dealing with severe anxiety or trauma. Thompson often marveled at how Midnight seemed to understand exactly what each person needed from him, adjusting his energy and responsiveness to match their emotional state and therapeutic goals. Wellington had recovered completely from his injury and had returned to full participation in both ceremonial duties and therapeutic work. His experience during the recovery period had deepened his connection to the program participants, and he seemed to take special pleasure in working with individuals who were facing their own health challenges or setbacks. The program had attracted international attention and had been replicated in military units across Europe, North America, and Australia. Thompson regularly traveled to consult on new program development, sharing the protocols and insights that had emerged from their years of experience. Each new program adapted the basic model to fit local conditions and populations, but all maintained the core principle that had guided their work from the beginning: genuine respect for both human and animal participants. Dr. Wells had documented hundreds of success stories over the years, each unique but all sharing common themes of increased confidence, improved communication, enhanced emotional regulation, and stronger social connections. The program had proven that therapeutic benefits could be achieved through structured, respectful interactions that honored the dignity and agency of all participants, both human and equine. The ripple effects extended far beyond the immediate participants. Families had been strengthened, caregivers had learned new approaches to supporting their clients, and the military personnel involved had discovered new dimensions of service and purpose. The program had challenged assumptions about disability, about therapy, and about the remarkable capacity for interspecies understanding and healing. As Thompson stood in the courtyard one morning, watching Emma help a nervous new participant approach Midnight for the first time, he reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. What had begun as an unexpected moment of connection had grown into something that was changing lives on a daily basis. The program had taught everyone involved that healing could happen in the most unlikely places, that connection could transcend differences of species and ability, and that sometimes the most profound transformations began with the simple act of reaching out to touch another living being with kindness and respect. The legacy of that first morning continued to unfold, creating new stories of hope and healing with each passing day, proving that the gentle power of horses and the resilient spirit of humans could combine to create something truly extraordinary.